The old alarm clock blared at 4:30 a.m. Joe's hand, calloused and strong, slapped the snooze button, but he didn't roll over. Sleep was a luxury for later. Dawn was still a whisper on the Minnesota horizon. The house was quiet, a stillness that only exists before the world wakes. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment. The floorboards were cool under his bare feet. Another day, a day full of work, full of unknowns, but a day on his land. That thought was enough to get him moving, to pull him from the lingering warmth of his blankets and into the chill of the early morning. First things first, the weather. Joe padded into the kitchen. The small radio on the counter crackled to life. He listened intently to the forecast. Would it rain? Would the sun scorch? These weren't idle questions. The weather report was a critical piece of information. It dictated much of his day, sometimes his entire week. He peered out the window. The sky was still dark, a deep indigo. He could see the faint silhouette of the barn. He knew every line of that barn, every creak it made in the wind. It was a silent companion to his daily routines, standing steadfast against the elements. Coffee, strong and black, that was next. The aroma filled the small kitchen. It was a familiar smell, a comforting smell. It was the smell of readiness. He pulled on his worn denim overalls over his flannel shirt. These clothes were practically a second skin. They bore the stains of soil, grease, and honest sweat. They told the story of countless days spent working this land. His boots, caked with mud from yesterday, waited by the door. He laced them up tight. Each movement was practiced, efficient. There was no wasted effort in Joe's morning. Stepping outside, the air was crisp. It carried the scent of damp earth and distant pine. The stars were still visible, scattered like diamonds on black velvet. The farm was slowly stirring. A rooster crowed in the distance, a bold announcement of the approaching day. Joe took a deep breath. This was his world. This was his life. He felt a sense of purpose settle over him. The challenges were many, he knew that, but so were the rewards, though they weren't always measured in dollars and cents. He headed towards the barn, his shadow stretching long in the pre-dawn light. The low rumbling moos started as Joe approached the cattle barn. His herd knew his footsteps. They knew the sound of the gate latch. He opened the heavy door, and a wave of warm, earthy air greeted him. The cattle shifted in their stalls, their big eyes watching him. There was a trust there, a reliance. He was their caretaker. Their well-being depended on him, day in and day out. He spoke to them softly, a gentle word here, a scratch behind the ears there. It wasn't just about feeding them, it was about connection. These animals were part of his farm, part of his life. Feeding the cattle was hard, physical work. He climbed into the hayloft. The sweet smell of dried grass filled his nostrils. He forked down bales of hay, each one heavy. Then, it was time for grain. He scooped it into buckets, his muscles already warm. He moved methodically from stall to stall. He made sure each animal had its share. He checked their water troughs. He watched for any signs of illness. He knew each cow, its temperament, its habits. This daily interaction was fundamental. It was a rhythm, a constant in the ever-changing world of farming. With the cattle fed and content, Joe turned his attention to the fields. Today, it was the corn. The young stalks stood in neat rows, reaching for the sun. He walked the perimeter, his boots sinking slightly into the soft soil. He checked for pests, for weeds, for any signs of distress. The corn was vulnerable at this stage. It needed careful tending. He thought about the long journey from seed to harvest. Each stage required patience and hard work. Farming wasn't just a job, it was a partnership with nature, a delicate dance of give and take. He felt the sun on his face now, a welcome warmth. Later he would move to the soybean fields. They stretched out, a sea of green under the vast Minnesota sky. Soybeans were another staple of his farm. Like the corn, they required constant vigilance. He would inspect the leaves, check the soil moisture. He might need to adjust the irrigation. Or perhaps today was a day for cultivating, for keeping the weeds at bay. Every decision mattered. Every action had a consequence. The scale of it could be daunting, but Joe faced it with a quiet determination. his connection to the land unwavering. The price of diesel fuel was always on Joe's mind. It was a constant, nagging worry. His tractor, his combine, his truck, they all drank fuel. And the prices just kept climbing. It felt like a relentless squeeze. Every time he filled a tank, he saw his profit margins shrinking. He tried to be efficient, he planned his trips carefully, he maintained his equipment meticulously, but some costs were simply beyond his control. This uncertainty was a heavy burden. It made planning for the future difficult, almost a gamble. He often found himself doing mental calculations, trying to make the numbers work. Then there was the weather. It was the farmer's oldest friend and fiercest enemy. One week, it could be perfect. Gentle rains, warm sunshine, the crops would thrive. The next week, a sudden hailstorm could flatten everything. Or a drought could parch the land, starving the plants. Joe had seen it all. He had learned to be resilient, but it never got easy. He watched the sky with a practiced eye. He listened to the wind. He felt the changes in the air. He knew that Mother Nature always had the final say, despite all his hard work and careful planning. Beyond fuel and weather, there was the broader uncertainty of the future. Market prices for corn and soybeans fluctuated wildly. Global events, trade deals, government policies, they all had an impact, things he couldn't influence. He thought about his children. Would they want to take over the farm? Could they make a living here with all these challenges? The thought of the farm not staying in the family was a painful one. It was more than just land and buildings, it was a legacy. It was generations of hard work and dedication, etched into the very soil. But despite these daily struggles, Joe kept going. What drove him? It was something deep inside, a profound connection to this place. He loved the smell of freshly turned earth. He loved watching the crops grow. He loved the independence of being his own boss, even if that boss worked him harder than anyone else would. There was a satisfaction in producing food, in knowing that his labor helped feed people. This wasn't just a job for Joe, it was a calling. It was who he was. It was in his blood, passed down from his father and his grandfather before him. As the afternoon wore on, the sun began its slow descent. The harsh light of midday softened, long shadows stretched across the fields. Joe worked until the light started to fade. His body ached. His muscles were tired. Every movement was a little slower now. The physical toll of a farmer's day was immense. It was a weariness that seeped deep into his bones. He straightened his back, wincing slightly. He wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. Another day was drawing to a close. He had given it his all, just like every other day. He drove the tractor back towards the barn. The sky was a canvas of breathtaking colors, oranges, pinks, purples. It was a daily masterpiece, free for anyone who took the time to look. Joe always did. This beauty, this quiet spectacle, was part of his reward. It was a reminder of the natural world he was so intimately connected to. The exhaustion he felt was a good kind of tired. It was the tiredness of honest labor, the tiredness of a day spent doing something meaningful, something real. It was a feeling of accomplishment, quiet and profound. Back at the farmhouse, he washed up. The cool water felt good on his skin. He changed out of his work clothes. His wife Sarah had dinner ready. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air. They ate together, talking quietly about their day, the small joys, the minor frustrations. This was the rhythm of their life, simple perhaps, but rich in its own way. He looked out the window at the darkening fields. The land was resting, and soon he would rest too, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Later, Joe sat on the porch swing. The crickets were chirping their nightly song. The air was cool and still. He felt a deep sense of peace. Farming was a tough life, no doubt about it, but it was his life. It was a life of purpose, a life connected to the seasons, to the earth. He wouldn't trade it, not for anything. The satisfaction of seeing his crops grow, of caring for his animals, of working his own land, these were things that money couldn't buy. As the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, Joe felt a quiet pride. He was a farmer, and that was enough.